All right, on to the next step. So one quick thing that I didn't mention on the previous step was putting the spur gear. So this is where the motor is going to go if you end up getting a motor for it. So the spur gear will go on that same side. So spur gear will go right like that. You may need to sand down certainly inside maybe, but you may need to sand that down a little bit if it does not quite fit. So, so that's really the last part of that before we put anything else on. Next is the front. So these are the main pieces you'll need. So we have this is the upper, that's the lower. So notice where the screw holes are. So these are basically vertical, where those are more horizontal. Then we have the bomb block, and we have our two front wheel axles, and then we need two steering pins. I think I forgot to print those in the color we need. So we'll grab a print color. So we'll grab these in silver. All right, so then with that, I would start with the upper because I'm going to be able to connect that with the bomb block. And so the way that we do this is going to be important. We're going to need some space here, so it's going to go like this. So keep that in mind, that this goes like this. Then we need some of those nuts. In fact, we're going to need 2 nuts for now. And then this says we'll need 8 of the regular countersunk. Although I think we're going to need probably 6, and then 2 of the longer, well, yeah, 2 of the longer ones. And you can certainly try the shorter ones, especially if you've got extra, but if the shorter ones don't work, I think this was the place where some used longer ones. So certainly try shorter ones in case you want to use longer ones in another place. So we're going to need to put these in here. Now they may fall in nicely, they may not. So what we really need to do is get these to match up with the hex pattern that's there. Now that fell in really nicely. Yours might not. So if yours doesn't, a couple things. First is if you can at least get this through on just the bomb block. And so now, yes, we'll attach it with that, but one thing that I found helpful to at least kind of pull it into the right place is to kind of just put it there and then screw a screw in if you can get it through, and kind of get it to thread up. Now you might want to hold it with a pliers, which I think is what I'm going to do, and take, won't be super easy as we have a ton of space, but let's see if that allows me to at least start. All right, now we're gonna have to undo this one way or another, but this is especially helpful if there just seems to be a little bit of extra stuff. So I usually just like to pull it until this nut kind of pulls down into place. Now, sometimes the nice thing about that is if it kind of pulls down into place, then it'll fit a little tighter, and then it might not actually move on you, so that might be helpful. In fact, that may be a benefit over what I'm gonna do here, because I'm working with a loose nut and not the one in my head. So once again, I'm gonna try to line that up. And certainly you could try to do that pulling down here, but if that nut doesn't really go in to begin with, you might actually need a longer one to kind of pull it down. And then sometimes I'll use the longer one to pull it down so I can get it threaded in, and then I'll replace it with the shorter one after that. But we do really only want to use the shorter ones for this part. All right, so now, while yes, this is the top, this is really what I want right now. I'm really kind of going to treat it as the bottom at the moment. All right, then next is we want to take the hubs with the front axles, which I guess I didn't take out yet. So front axles. Now, for most of you, you don't have like clearish color, so you're really not even going to notice these. By the time you put on the wheels, you won't even notice they're there. The reason I printed them like this was because they seem to be easier. This just needs to be a little more accurate than some of the other things. So this printer is very accurate. And so this is where, if I can use the shorter pieces, I want to, but it may not work. But here's also where you need to be really careful. So this whole step, we have to be careful. If you don't want to tighten it so hard that you strip it. All right, and so, but I see, looks like it's not really going to change much. Yeah, so there, notice that it just kind of pulled out, so it really isn't gripping. And so that's where in, I think the other videos, they use an M38. I think using an M312 is probably going to be more beneficial here. So definitely I'm going to use, the nice thing is this really threads in, and this is not gonna, because this to me seems to be the thing that's most likely to come out, and so I want something that's going to be solid. So this M312 I think really helps here. All right, so once this is tight, I don't really want to keep screwing this in, because I will strip it and then it will just come off. Don't over tighten it. So here, notice that it's loose. Basically, you just need to tighten it far enough so that this is not loose. It doesn't wiggle. Once it's there, you don't have to go any further. So I would just kind of do a quarter, half turn at a time, and that's done. Okay, same thing here. Okay, I'm going to use, since the shorter one didn't seem to work, use the longer one. And there we go. So it's obviously still loose. Still a little bit loose. Just a tiny bit more. Maybe 1/8 of a turn. Yeah, 1/8 of a turn's good there. So that's now tight. I prefer doing these before connecting them here, just because sometimes it's hard to get the screw in if you do it after. Now it's doable, but I prefer doing it before. So if you watch Daniel Nerey's video, he'll do it before. All right, here, now it's going to be technically the way that you're going to want to put this is, you'll notice the bottom, there's a little chamfer. Okay, you want the chamfer on this one, well, to be on the top. So they're kind of mirror images in terms of this. Now, depending on how it works, you might flip it just because the way that it's bending, it might work a little bit better, but that's not a huge deal other than notice that these are also countersunk like the others. So I'm going to put, just going to start with the bottom of each one. Okay, and so here, notice right now it's pretty loose. I'm going to leave it like that for the moment. I'm going to probably screw it in further later, but in fact I see it's not really quite straight. I'll unscrew it and see if I can get it a little bit straighter. I might not be able to, but I will work that out later if not. All right, so pretty loose, but that's fine for now. Here, same thing. Put this in. This, screwing it in just far enough so that like that the screw's not going to go anywhere. So these are pretty loose, but it's not going to go anywhere. Now this. Okay, eventually we're going to have screws that go through here, but not yet, because that's not until we attach it to the chassis. So from here, and if having these out too much is causing issues trying to screw this in, you certainly can screw that in a little bit more, but I would still rather have it too loose than too tight. All right, so that's attached. That's the main part we need here. And then here too. Notice I've got two extras here because I ended up using the long ones for these axles. All right, so right now, okay, so nothing super tight. The idea is the wheels are going to go on here. So we do want these to move fairly freely because if you tighten these too much, they're not going to move freely. And so I would be very careful in making sure that you don't tighten it too much because students tend to tighten it way too much and then this like doesn't even move or it hardly moves. And so the idea is I want it just enough so that there's not a huge gap here, but so like if I hold this tight, like there's a little bit of a gap there, that might be okay. I might need to go a little bit more, but you may need to hold this as you turn. Notice I'm just putting my finger behind so that it doesn't rotate further. And all right. Once again, if I push that tight there, okay, I want to make sure that that still moves. Same thing here, make sure this still moves. I'm basically just going just far enough so that it looks like it's kind of tight, but it moves nicely. So it's not moving quite as much, but it should move pretty freely. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here. Probably tighten it just a tiny bit more, but not a ton. All right, so that doesn't move quite as freely, but actually that's pretty good. So I don't need it to like spin completely, but it should move easily. Same thing here. I'll tighten it just a tiny bit more. I'll hold that. All right, so that's still moving okay. I'm probably gonna loosen that just a tiny bit. There, I think that's better. And same thing here. All right, that's probably okay. I'm gonna pull it back just a tiny bit. There, that's better. So there is step 3. Now notice for me, like it kind of stops rubs in this area. That's okay, because this is gonna be there. Like it will rotate here to here. It should rotate fairly freely, but there is our step.